very excited about today's conversations. We're a couple minutes late, so I'm going to jump right in. And first, I'm excited to introduce my colleague, Dr. Leikin, who is going to lead the conversation. And if I can, there we go. Sara has been with the National Math and Science Initiative for several years. She leads our STEM partnerships and solutions, and she will be leading our conversation. So with that, I am going to bring Sara into the conversation and invite Sara to introduce you to NMSI.
Thanks so much, Juan, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm very excited to lead this discussion and introduce you to our panelists here in a few minutes. To start with, just a few words about NMSI if we are new to you. NMSI truly believes that STEM education is the greatest lever to accessing opportunity and unlocking student potential for all students. We know that STEM jobs are increasing faster. We know that they typically offer higher salaries than some other careers. And aside from just the content, I think when we think about science, technology, engineering, and math, also thinking about what it means to be technologically literate, to have creative and critical thinking skills that we know are needed across the board for success in careers and vocations. Especially thinking about those careers that don't exist yet, or those technologies that are of the future. And we want our students to really be prepared for that. You can go to the next slide. So at NMSI, we have developed a really holistic set of services for pre-K through the college years. Again, we are focused on all students, and that includes special relationships we have with military-connected families and students, as well as really intentional thinking about those students furthest from opportunity. And those supports include everything from teacher training to student supports, administrative supports for school leaders, and also program management, so that schools can be prepared for the long term. We are not a one-size-fits-all organization, nor do we aim to sort of come in, solve, and move out. We really work with schools and students and families for long-term solutions. And you can learn more about us at nms.org. So I am very proud, as I mentioned, to facilitate this conversation today, and pleased to introduce you to our panelists today. We are joined by Talia Milgrom-Elcott, who is the founder and executive director of 100K in 10, and also on NMSI's board. So welcome, Talia. And Dr. Cassandra Herring, who is the founder, president, and CEO of the Branch Alliance for Educator Diversity. I'm so pleased to have her with us today and her insights. And Dr. Michael Marder, who is the executive director and co-founder of the UTeach Institute out of University of Texas, Austin, which is a nationwide organization that we also have a long and proud history of working with in partnership. So welcome to the three of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm just going to start off with the question to kick us all off. And Cassandra, we'll start with you. Okay. If we're acknowledging today and really thinking about STEM workforce shortages, why focus on teacher development?
Well, the answer to that question is very simple. Teaching is the profession that leads to all the other professions. What do I mean by that? Well, K-12 schools are the site where students are academically prepared to engage with all of the career options that they might have before them. And teachers obviously are essential to that academic preparation. In addition to that, though, in K-12 schools is where young people begin to explore careers, to think about what opportunities are open to them beyond those careers that they might have in their immediate family or in their community. Essential to that, I might add, in terms of that career exploration, is the importance to have diverse teachers that are helping to share diverse opportunities for young people. It's important for students to see themselves, to identify with potential careers, and obviously that can start in schools, both in the classroom as well as with instructional and curricular materials that expose young people to the career possibilities before them.
Thank you for that. And we know that part of this workforce shortage, especially in STEM, again, is a shortage includes both a shortage of STEM teachers, and as we're going to talk about today, and also thinking about those demographics where there is a shortage in STEM careers as well as in STEM teaching, frankly. Can we talk a little bit about the relationship again between these shortages, whether that's STEM teachers or the overall STEM workforce shortage? And Talia, your organization has done quite a bit of work on this.
Totally, and I just want to build on what Cassandra said, because teachers are the fuel for everything that comes after. Teachers are the ones who open up opportunities for us. When you talk to almost anyone, they can tell you a teacher who turned their life around, someone who shaped them. I think of Mrs. Diamond in second grade, and I think of Mrs. Maid in 8th grade. But we all know those teachers, and they do that because they open up career opportunities, they open up vistas for us, they believe in us, and can see some potential in us and help to point the way. And it's about a mix of content and some of these other like ways of connecting and inspiring us that they do. And so I think you see that in the STEM fields as well. So what do we know? We know that there is a growing shortage of STEM. There's a growth in STEM careers. We know that, and I assume all of us in the call here, like this is preaching to the choir. So we know there's a growth in STEM careers. We know that there are STEM careers that they typically pay better. They across the board pay better, and actually people with undergraduate or even high school level STEM skills earn more, whether or not they are using those in STEM careers. And so these are family sustaining wages. And some of the biggest challenges we experience as a planet are STEM challenges. And so when we think about, do we have enough people, and is that group of people diverse enough to actually solve those challenges? We know that we need many more people with STEM skills to be able to truly address climate crisis, the health challenges, the technology challenges that we're seeing. So all those things feel true. And yet what we see is that in schools with a majority of children of color, they often do not have a STEM teacher in every classroom. A majority of schools with the majority of their students are children of color don't offer both chemistry and physics, almost always a majority, at least one of those courses. You're seeing an impossibility of a pipeline into STEM careers. And then I'll just add one more thought to this, which I would love to hear my fellow panelists think about too, which is STEM skills are not just hard skills. And what we're hearing and seeing from employers is that STEM skills are a mix of the content you need to know to be able to solve some of these challenges or take these careers on, but they're also about perseverance, grit. They're about failing and learning from failure. So there's so many other things that happen. They're about collaboration and teamwork. They're about experimentation. They're about critical thinking, and they're about independent thinking, taking some knowledge and applying it in a different context. All of those things are happening inside of STEM classes when done well. And it's that mix of things actually that is particularly potent when we unleash our young people into the world and into the workforce.
I'd love to build on the things that both Cassandra and Talia said. One thing to add is that the United States really stands out in the world, on the one hand, for the strength of our technology, and on the other hand, for the really remarkable holes in our education system. In Europe, 4 years of physics is customary for every student. In China, it's 5 years of physics. I'm a physicist. In the United States, less than 40% of high school students get as much as 1 year. For Black students, that number is 28%. And Black students are 3 times as likely as white students to be in a school that doesn't offer physics at all. Without this course, students have no realistic path into engineering. They probably can't become doctors. Much of STEM is cut off to them just because of what their schools didn't offer. Of course, Talia is right that it's much more than just the content. How the material is taught matters enormously. And so the first stage of providing decent teaching is just to deliver some of the rudiments of the subject. But that's really not enough. We need teachers who are experienced enough that they can begin to put the subject in context. They can explain something about where the subject came from, why it matters, and what you would do with it. And to explain to students what they would do with it, not by telling them, but letting them experience it. These are skills that teachers pick up with difficulty and over time. They're what are the hallmarks of the best and the greatest teachers. So we have a set of dual lacks. On the one hand, we're in a very primitive situation where we simply don't have teachers at all for a majority of the population, truly extraordinary. And then on the other hand, we have the challenge, if the disciplines are really to be fully realized and become something that the students can use creatively, of supporting the teachers who are in the schools, providing them continued professional development, motivation to stay, opportunities for growth, and making sure that kids really have access to the best of what this country has to offer.
I'll just jump in on that because I feel like something we talked about before, and I think it's true for all three of us. The ways that we are so advanced and the mismatch between that and some of the ways that we feel so behind matches other ways. I think about our maternal mortality and how that shows up differently for Black mothers and non-Black mothers. I think about other ways, and then you think about physics and medical school and who has access. And I feel like we begin to see like the stark connections between what happens for our young people K-12 and then what happens to us as a country. And what does it mean to be a country where we see these kind of these stark differences that cross education levels, income levels. You cannot educate your way out of some of these differences. And that for me is so counter to the hope of what America could be or should be. And to think that that really starts in the K-12 space. It starts with teachers and extends out in all these other ways. And I want to just put that out here to my fellow panelists because I feel like there's so much shared conviction there.
Absolutely. I would +1 that, Talia, and I would just underscore it's absolutely about the content that they're teaching and the manner in which that content is delivered. As Michael said, it's also about who those teachers are and how they come to interact with young people in their classrooms beyond the content, building relationships, having positive, high expectations for student performance across the board, their ability to give feedback that's meaningful. And I love how you opened, Talia, with those great inspiring teachers that, helped you know your full potential. I wish that was a reality for every American student in classrooms, but unfortunately, students don't get encouraged and pushed to go into STEM fields. Or teachers don't express high expectations and a feeling that children can meet those high expectations. And so teachers themselves could be promoting and supporting and pushing students into STEM fields when unfortunately that's not happening on a wide scale. So I think we also have to think about how do we help teachers know how to guide towards STEM fields, how to support students in their exploration of potential careers there, even when they don't have images of professional scientists and others that look like them. How do we help them see that that's not a closed door, but truly a window of opportunity for them to step into?
So I think for those of you listening, you may be wondering in the face of these challenges, if the number of great teachers coming out of our preparation programs is going up fast enough. And unfortunately, not only is it not going up fast enough, for the last decade, the number of teachers coming from our institutions has been dropping. It's been dropping pretty steadily, both for teachers overall and for STEM teachers, at about 3% per year. And this is happening at the same time that the STEM professions, as we've all said, are becoming more and more critical for the future of our kids. I've been running for more than 20 years a program which started locally and then went nationally to prepare STEM teachers. And we prepared we're preparing about 800 a year now and hoping to grow that. But unfortunately, we're facing headwinds, and I think Talia can speak also from the national perspective on this matter. We are all groping for ways to increase the numbers that we're preparing, and instead we find ourselves trying to stem the decreases.
Thank you for bringing that up. And we talked about what great STEM teaching can look like, and again that motivational piece and what representation means. And to your point, Dr. Marder, thinking about teacher preparation, where are those challenges? Is it in recruitment? Why are there those challenges in recruitment? And then how are we retaining? And again, I know all of you on this call have experience and have been working in that arena of not only encouraging students to go into the education field, but then also retaining them in that field once they're there. And I'll kick it back to you, Dr. Marder.
Well, recruitment is something that people at preparation programs across the country work out very, very hard. And we just ended a recruitment drive to fill our full classes, which I'm glad to say at the University of Texas was successful. But I think there is a reason that overall in the nation as a whole, as well as state by state, the numbers have been dropping. And there are two primary factors that are contributing to this if you pull back and look at the problem. You might think that it has to do with the teaching profession itself, with the bad rap that the teaching profession gets in the public eye. But I think there's something that actually is less well known and has a bigger impact. And it simply has to do with barriers to entering the teaching profession for those who have the ability and wish to make that transition. And those barriers take the form of both time and money. The time barriers are largely coming from very steadily increasing regulations, primarily at the state level. 20 years ago, the regulations in the state of Texas, where I've done the work on teachers personally, were relatively minimal, and the state agencies were really partners in trying to prepare more teachers. At this point, we are facing probably the most tightly regulated profession that the university puts out. We are vastly more regulated than the engineering profession. We face multiple agencies with conflicting requirements, and it has become very, very difficult to put anybody out as an undergraduate in 4 years. And when people come as career changers, we face many barriers there as well. And now that problem meets the problem of hugely rising tuition costs. Anytime the path to becoming a teacher lasts beyond 4 years, boom, tuition costs, boom, living costs. For anyone who wants to make a career change, if they're coming from out of state to a university, they can face $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year in tuition. And unlike other areas where we provide a huge amount of financial support to people to get into professions with that require postgraduate training, we're not providing it for teachers except in scattered cases with grants that are unequal to the task. So time is a problem. Money is a problem. These problems are growing worse year by year, and we're watching the decline in people entering teaching that this is alone is sufficient to explain.
I'll maybe zoom. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Herring.
So I was just going to sort of echo what Michael said there, and then add on top of that, the design of teacher preparation is an area that is within colleges and universities' locus of control, and that an area that we need to revisit. So my organization, the Branch Alliance for Educator Diversity, works with university-based teacher preparation programs across the country, 172 in our network. And the kinds of things that we talk about are urgent needs for teacher preparation. One is a partnership with schools. No longer can we prepare teachers in isolation in universities without having really strong collaborative partnerships with K-12 schools. And I don't mean just placing student teachers in schools, but literally a mutually supporting, mutually invested partnership with schools is absolutely key. Teacher prep programs need to give students opportunities to try on teaching. So not just to learn about teaching theoretically, but literally to practice teaching through service activities, through tutoring, through other experiences Even simulations are now a possibility to get teacher candidates practicing what it means to be teachers and not just reading about student behavior and then being thrown sort of in the deep end. The other thing I think is faculty knowledge and currency about instructional moves. The more that teacher education faculty are engaged in school environments, are engaged in STEM fields, so they're accurately communicating what aspiring teachers can share in their classrooms, is hugely, hugely important. And then the last thing, and Talia, I'll throw it to you after this, is that the instructional materials, the curriculum, the textbooks, examples that we're using in teacher prep and ultimately using in K-12 schools ought to have images that represent the diversity of the student body. If we are continuing to put forth curriculum that has a very homogeneous, I can't say that word today, homogeneous profile of people who fit in different careers, that sends a message without saying a word. So I think we have to begin to look for representation in our curricula and instructional materials. We have to open up opportunities for faculty and K-12 teachers that are preparing teachers to experience the kinds of opportunities that can happen after graduation. And we have to begin to solidify partnerships beyond just a school or just a university or just the workforce. We have to begin to work together to think about how do we prepare teachers to train the workforce that we need.
I love this. And I think everything that both you and Michael said, Cassandra, is right. I'll just zoom us back for 1 minute because we are looking at the challenge of recruiting and preparing excellent STEM teachers, 100,000 that we committed to in response to President Obama's call in his State of the Union in 2011. And about 5 years or so in, we had been working with hundreds of amazing organizations to support them as they were preparing teachers and recruiting teachers and trying to continue to give professional development to teachers. And we heard all of the things that you both shared and dozens more reasons why they were struggling. And I can tell you the moment we were sitting together as a team feeling like, how can we support a network, all these different organizations, when there are dozens of different things people are working on, all of them impediments to doing this very basic thing, maybe like on the short list of like one handful of things that any country needs to do, like preparing its teachers to prepare its young people. It's ancient. We do that. We bury our dead. We protect our borders. Like there are very, very few things that we do, and educating our next generation is on that short list. And here we were. We had all these amazing, well-meaning organizations struggling to do it. And we had this feeling that you cannot solve a problem you don't understand. Like if we don't know all of the reasons why this thing is hard, we will never get traction. We are all of us working on so many different facets of this problem. Like what are the chances we ever solve any of it? So we ended up actually talking to, or listening, I should say, to thousands of folks, majority teachers, but also other leaders, principals and other leaders from across the sector, asking them why did they think it was so hard to get and keep great teachers, especially in STEM, and just to keep asking why and why and why until we hit bedrock. And what we uncovered from that massive exercise in listening was that there were about 100 reasons why we have a persistent STEM teacher shortage. And all the things you all shared were on there, culturally relevant pedagogy included in it, and dozens more. And so in fact, that feeling we had, that it feels like we're working on so many different things, that was accurate. We actually literally were working on 100 different parts of this problem. And that could tell us a lot about maybe why we aren't getting traction on any of them. So we ended up actually doing some work with like complexity and network science to figure out, are there what we call keystone species? Are there certain parts of the problem that if they get fixed, unlock many other parts, start to make other parts easier? In ecology, it's called keystone species. They're the species in an ecosystem that has outsized influence on the rest of the ecosystem, keeping it healthy. And we found that there were about 10 of these keystone species. And one of them was about, like, some of them have to do with prestige, bonuses, and loan forgiveness, getting at some things you said, Michael. One of them had to do with actually high school STEM courses and whether they were culturally and personally relevant to students. But we also heard that teachers wanted time to collaborate during the school day. They wanted time for professional development during the school day. I mean, basic things that as professionals, most of them with master's degrees, that we would ask for. And they wanted somebody in the building who was responsible for the quality of the workplace. Was anyone looking out for what it feels like to go to school as a teacher? And I have to say, when we heard that, and we heard it mostly from teachers, not from principals, other school administrators, not from other sector leaders, it was a moment of enormous humility. Because I think, as someone who has spent more than close to 2 decades in education, I thought until that moment about schools as a place where kids go to learn. And I forgot that schools are also a place where more Americans than any other industry or sector go to work every day, and who was attending to what that felt like. And so just these are systemic challenges. There are things we can do. And you said there were locus of control, Cassandra. Also, like in universities, there are locus of control everywhere. Wherever you are, there are things you can do to close this gap and to start to make the profession more attractive, to keep more teachers in, and to start to create a positive feedback loop.
So I think, Talia, understanding the keystone species, thank you for that terminology, is huge, right? That's knowing what the problem is and knowing where to solve it. I'm just curious from you. I mean, you all are solving it, right? You're getting to 100K in 10. Was it because you addressed the keystone species, or were there certain solutions that you found that were more efficacious than others?
We're at our 10-year mark, and I can knock on wood, say that we are on track to hit this goal on time this year. And I mean, something I thought about a lot, Michael, you were saying that it's dropped 3%. So 35% is what I've seen drop in teacher preparation programs from 2010 to 2018, essentially the years that 100K in 10 was functioning. In that time, our partners have prepared more STEM teachers year on year, with the potential, even in this crazy time, that they'll prepare more teachers in the last 2 years than in any year prior. So true apples to apples comparisons there. And we're doing some digging right now to understand why is that? Why in the face of this crazy time and this downturn across the country has that been true? I think part of it is young people are voting with their feet. They're choosing institutions that support them, like UTeach. I'm assuming many of those 170 plus organizations that you work with and partner with, so places that will support them to be prepared well and support them once they get in the classroom. We also think there's a lot of power in a big goal. We have a lot of priorities that pull at us, more now maybe than ever before, and we're tired, but having a big goal keeps us in the game when other things get hard. And I think there's something really powerful in that too. And then I really do believe that we try too hard to solve all the problems on our own, and we try to prove to our funders and to the press that we've got it all figured out here, but none of us has it all figured out. And when we can create safe enough environments where people can say that, and then they can partner with others and learn, there's an opportunity for really accelerated progress and problem solving and innovation, which is what we need in a pretty safe way. And with amazing colleagues. And that is, a lot of what 100K in 10 did over these years was to create that kind of space. And so the rate of innovation and problem solving was very rapid for these programs.
Cassandra, I wanted to celebrate all of the characteristics of teacher preparation programs that you mentioned. Those were all amongst the UTeach elements of success, and they've been part of our founding principles since we started. For example, it's always the case that the very first thing a student does in UTeach is to go into schools and start teaching lessons under the guidance of experienced master teachers. But the whole list that you gave are things that have always been of great concern. In the past 2 years, the attention to culturally relevant pedagogy has greatly increased. I think this is not something we paid enough attention to, but I think everyone at UTeach has acknowledged this, and all across the country there are gatherings and discussions of how we can do better. So I applaud everything you say, But I also am reminded almost daily that we do this increasingly against a background of very insistent and very lengthy and very detailed requirements from states. And if we don't obey every single one of the dictates on spreadsheets that have 640 rows, some of them highlighted in pink, then we may not be able to prepare teachers at all. So it's a constant struggle. Talia, I'd like to throw out what I've felt for some time is maybe one of the main underlying barriers, and see if this is something that you came across in your discussions. And I think I'm somewhat uniquely placed to say this because of my day job. My day job is physics research professor. And one of the ways that I could explain my day job is that part of the function is to bypass the US education system so that we do not get pressure from the tech sector to fix everything that we just talked about. The way it works is very simple. If we have very well-funded public institutions that make sure that STEM industries and the tech industry get what they need. And they do it from domestic students, if possible, and international students as necessary. And when I go over to that part of my job, I am very well funded and very well supported. And when I go over to the other part, which is preparing teachers, I'm faced with the struggle that we've all been describing. And I have to reconcile every day the level of support I have for one with the struggle that I face for the other. And if you were to ask me, is there a solution? My solution would be some portion of the resources that are available to help students bypass our education system should be available to help prepare teachers so we don't have to bypass our education system. That's very brief. I could make it longer, but I'd just be curious, Talia, if that's a point of view you've heard too.
I think if I were distilling what you're saying is that we're under, like the teaching programs, teacher preparation programs are under resourced, that they, we do not invest in our teachers. We do not pay our teachers. There's so many repercussions of that core insight that you're sharing. And I would say 100%, we heard that and saw it. And some work we have been doing actually in other contexts and sectors to help different folks identify their own keystone species has helped us to see another thing that's going on here that was a little bit hidden to us before, which was ironic. But there's also I think a general okayness with underpaying women and for what we consider women's work. And I do think there's we can see that across many sectors. It gets even more acute when we layer on the combination of gender and race. So our comfort with underpaying women of color to do what we consider women's work. And I do think that, as sectors become more female forward, their salaries drop. So there's something going on here about this under-resourcedness, which is like bigger than how much the Department of Education is being funded versus NSF. And it has to do, I think, with some prevailing norms or like permissiveness we give ourselves around these things. So I think there's something in there to what you're saying. And some of what we're trying to figure out is what are the keystone species for unlocking that? And where the keystone species are trying to identify the intersection of the things with the greatest impact. For sure, more funding would be that, higher salaries would be that, and the things that have a chance of working. So you really want to do is start to get that snowball rolling, because as you start to solve things, other things become available to be solved as well. So it creates a virtuous cycle. But I would say 100% resources and all of those manifestations showed up across the map.
Go ahead.
Just a quick clarification. I wasn't so much meaning that programs need more support, although of course that can always be helpful. But if you just put yourself in the student's shoes and look what a student faces as they look to make transitions into different careers, there are vastly different resources available for a student trying to make the career transition into research from the student trying to make the career transition into teaching. That's where I think the most glaring discrepancies arise. It's not very well known, but if you're a student, boy, does it hit you hard.
Absolutely. And I know, Sarah, you're trying to get in here, but I want to just punctuate that, Michael, because if we look at teacher preparation programs that have taken on residency models, the struggle to continue to fund resident stipends is real. And there's been some investment in programs, but I've seen more often than I care to. Residency programs that might be high performing, that might be diversifying the teaching pool, that might be really preparing high quality, effective, diverse educators have to close because of funding, right? We aren't putting money into making that transition into teaching the way that we are into other fields. So I think you're absolutely correct on that point.
I think that point is so, I think there's such an emphasis on this piece. And I wonder, I would love to ask you all this question is, what do we think the responsibility of, since we're talking specifically about STEM careers here, of the tech sector is to be weighing in here on the teacher pipeline, recognizing, as we said very much at the beginning, Cassandra, you said, teaching is the profession that leads to all other professions. And we know that there's so many ways for students now to become educated. And I'm going to sort of use that word here loosely because we know that means, certifications. The tech industry has, there's increasing ways of students becoming able to go into certainly tech careers. But when we think about education in the STEM fields and those going into education, how well versed are our teachers coming up in those industry certifications? What is their access to that certifications and to that same sort of process so that there's a feeling of both, I think, worth and knowledge in that sector, as we know things are changing exponentially, and also their ability to transfer that knowledge to young people. So we'd love to throw it out there to anyone to respond to. Where do we think the tech sector has a responsibility in this work?
So I'm
and just a question, should we also be,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, do we want to invite other folks who are listening to also join with some questions, Sarah?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And if anyone would like to ask any questions, they can put them in the comment section in the chat there. You should have an opportunity to do that. And we'll certainly reach out to those questions as they come in, and we'll have time at the end as well. Thanks, Talia.
So I was just going to answer your question by kind of reflecting on this last little bit of conversation. Oftentimes, when industry wants to invest in more STEM graduates from higher education, they invest in the School of Science. What if partnering with K-12, with the College of Education, and developing K-12 STEM teachers is a way to go? And investing in innovation, so like residency models, like early pathway programs into teaching, which are a bridge between high school and teacher preparation programs. Oftentimes there isn't that much money to do innovative kinds of preparation pathways, and so being a strong partner there certainly could move the needle down the field.
There's some companies that have been really thoughtful about trying to develop the teacher workforce and have made investments. I'm going to give a shout out to ExxonMobil, which, amongst other things, gave the initial gift that created the National Math and Science Initiative and also led to UTeach expansion. And I think they didn't get as much credit as they deserved for doing this. It was a bold move, and I think it has had an enormous impact. Another set of organizations I think deserve credit, since Sarah, you raised the matter of industry certifications. The place that's really good about this, I think, is the community college sector. They're nimble, they have contact with the local community. They're really good at figuring out which certifications are needed in the local environment. And so I think, again, it's just some appreciation is due to them. They're the ones who, in partnership with high schools, I think are the most successful at helping those certifications go down in a meaningful way to the high schools. But the four-year institutions can do a much better job of partnering with the community colleges and making sure that students going through them have a wide range of options, starting with what might be initially limited industry certifications and then move into a broader range of opportunities. So there's a ton of good stuff going on and lots more to do.
I'll put out maybe a controversial thought too, which is it is 100% right that there's amazing opportunity for the tech sector and corporations generally to invest in their pipeline and to really think about like that pipeline all the way through. So teachers to support the full next generation of all the other professions and more teachers. We need to be in a place where we don't need to teach for America anymore, because teaching is just a great career that all of us would want to do, that we'd be thrilled for our children to do. And so there's always a role to play. And 100K10 is an example of that. We have 30 plus foundations and corporations that joined us on this journey. Like there's a role for everyone, and good change has a role for everyone. Good mobilizations always do. And I would say, like, when a country or a society gives up its most important functions to the private sector, maybe that's not such a good thing. And there's nothing more at the heart, really, or a few things more at the heart of what we do than preparing teachers and supporting teachers. So we'd also say we are maybe one of the most important things that corporations can do is to not just put their dollars, but their advocacy, which is much more powerful than their CSR dollars, into supporting significant increases in governmental funding for teachers, because that is the only scale game in town.
Thank you for that. And I do want to call out Roxanne Morris in the chat. And Roxanne, fun fact, I'm actually based here in Albuquerque. So Roxanne is watching us from the Santa Rosa School District, home of the famous Blue Hole. And so we should definitely connect after, because she is echoing exactly what we've been talking about in terms of struggles with serving schools with staff they have on hand and resources, both from a community college level and also in the K-12 district, and the need for things like online certification. And again, those connections with industry. So thanks so much for that, for adding that, Roxanne. I appreciate that. And again, if anyone else has any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. We are seeing them, and I'm happy to address them. As a sort of final round of thoughts here, there are some bright spots in our work, and in this, these ways that we are supporting teachers, due in large part to the three of you and the organizations that you serve and the work that you have done over the years. And so would love to hear about some bright spots that you are all engaged in. Talia, I know 100K10 has some really exciting things on the horizon, as do the rest of you. And so would love to finish up on that note. So Talia, I'll kick it off with you.
Awesome. Earlier I said that we all have teachers who we can think about who inspired us. And Cassandra, you said, well, not all of us. And actually I should have said that. What I really should have said is that for most of us who have made it through whatever struggles we've experienced, if we've made it, we can look at a teacher who helped us to make the pivot. And that's not true for so many of our kids. And if only they had had that teacher, their story could have been different. And it's actually that very deep truth that has inspired us at 100K10 as we finish up this first decade mission and think about what is the next decade of work that needs to build on this past one to get us toward the 100, not just the 100,000, but to ending the STEM teacher shortage in the first place. That to really figure out what it is that we need to point our way to for that big shared goal, we have decided that we want to do that by listening to all kinds of young people, and in particular young people of color, Black, Latinx, and Native American, to tell their stories. So we are reaching out to young people from 13 through their 20s to invite people to tell their stories. Tell us about a learning experience in science and tech and engineering or math that you had. How did it make you feel? What happened? It could be joy-filled. It could be frustrating. And to really say whatever is true is what we want to hear. And from there, we'll set the next goal. Because I think there's so much innate curiosity, wonder, problem solving, tinkering, taking things apart, pulling them back together again, building things that young people have. And it's sometimes it's unleashed in schools and sometimes it's squelched. We need to hear both of those stories and all of the others to really figure out what we as a field need to do to ensure that by the end of the next 10 years, we don't look and see that there are so many young people who, if only they had had a great teacher to say, oh my God, like, you're good at this math thing. Like, let's find you this program. Let's partner. And so that might be some of you out there. You might be 13 through your 20s right now, and you can add your voice to this call from the people, uncommissioned, theuncommissioned.org. You can sign up there. You might be somebody who is in a position to listen and champion, where what your best position to do is to hear these stories and acknowledge and honor the truths that they're sharing. There's roles really for everyone in here, and we would love to join you. So we hope that you'll join us in that. And I hope that by the end of this year, by early next year, we'll have insights to share, some of which like resonate in our bones and some of which deeply surprise us.
There is a question that has come up in the chat around funding to increase the number of STEM teachers of color. I will say that at NMSI, we are working really closely actually with Dr. Marder and the UTeach Institute currently with HBCUs across the country, and where we are providing funding to increase those numbers and those streams. And Emily in the chat, feel free to reach out for additional information. And to our panelists, if you're aware of other initiatives out there, please feel free to let us know. As well, to everyone in the chat right now, I know there's a couple of people asking for connections, which is wonderful. There will be a follow-up email sent out, and I'm sure Juan will talk about this as we finish here as well. There will be a follow-up email sent out to all of you with connections and ways to connect as well. So thank you for that. And with that, I will just ask if any of the panelists have any last thoughts.
So just quickly, I would just add, at Branch Ed, we are thinking about instructional methodologies. In America, we still primarily take a Western approach to teaching and learning, very Eurocentric. And we are launching an innovative pedagogy series where we're revisiting the pedagogical traditions of indigenous communities, of Afrocentric communities, of Latinx communities. I think we have to begin to iterate not just on what are we teaching, but how are we engaging young people so that we are feeding into that future generation of innovators. And so I invite people to join with us as we're thinking about how do we teach differently in our classrooms in ways that really resonate with the individual identities and cultural communities that young people are coming from.
This has been incredible to listen to. I've enjoyed your conversation, and I'm taking a lot of notes. There is one comment in the chat that I want to highlight, and Michael, it really addresses part of what you were sharing. And so Laura Larkin makes the parallel that there are a tremendous number of people who go through extensive, expensive experience becoming members of the medical community. And she posits that, of course, they do that because, I'm going to want to use her words, they see the results of having prestige, well-paying, rewarding. And she notes, we need to make that same paradigm for teaching. And so we have talked a number of times about raising the profile of teaching, not only as a profession in the STEM profession, and STEM teaching as a STEM profession. In our last few minutes, I'm curious your perspective and the others of why are we struggling so much with this concept of teaching is a prestigious profession, STEM teaching is a prestigious part of the STEM ecosystem?
Well, I educate both future teachers and future doctors. I teach, I teach 120 physics students in the spring, and most of them are aiming to be doctors, and there's a dual enrollment version of that with thousands of students across the state of Texas. Doctors and teachers in some ways have a lot in common. They have to have very strong STEM skills, and they have to be oriented towards people. They want to serve people. And so I look at students trying to decide between these two options. The medical profession, the entry it's very challenging, it's very competitive, but the salaries at the end of the day are large enough that the students know they will be able to pay it back. And we've developed as a society an equilibrium in which that's the path through and we can make it work. Now, if that same student, and I have this discussion with students, that same student now looks at the teaching profession, the total cost is less, but they don't see how they can pay it back. It looks to them like an impenetrable wall, and they just give up. And this wall is getting higher every year. So if we could get to the point where the teaching profession had the salaries of the medical profession, that would solve that. That's not going to happen right away. But the barrier to entry, we can solve it. I have anyone who wants to reach out to me to hear particular solutions, I can provide them. I don't think they're fantastic. I think they're achievable. And if everyone were to rise up and just say, our public institutions have to do this for the good of the public, we could solve this problem. We could solve it together.
Say student loan forgiveness for STEM teachers is a keystone species in the teacher shortage. And we have, there are great examples. There are federal programs that are underutilized. California passed a local statewide law that connected STEM loan forgiveness for graduates of the their CSU, the California State University system, in teaching preparation. There are examples out there. There are bright spots out there that other states can borrow or learn from, the federal government can use. And if we could make going to college and preparing to become a teacher essentially debt-free for our young people, it would be a game changer.
Thank you both for that. Dr. Marder, you and I shared that my wife is a third career teacher, and she's able to do that because she was able to, to save some resources from her previous career because of my income. And so there are so many people in the universe who want to teach, who have that passion, and to your point, the barrier to entry is something that we can solve. And then those issues of prestige, and as Sara was talking about, what is the role of the STEM environment? It's also to recognize STEM teachers as part of the STEM profession and to hold them up as equals, and so making certain that we're doing all of those pieces. So again, thank you, all three of you, just an incredible conversation. As Sara did share, we will be reaching out. We'll share a video so that you all can share that with your colleagues. We will send out some additional contact information and resources. I did want to share here, if you're able to capture it, great. If not, we will be sending this out to you, but just how to reach us here at the National Math and Science Initiative. And last, I want to give a shout out and a thank you to our friends at Whiteboard Advisors, who are helping us in this series of thought leadership programs, bringing really great speakers to the community to hear what are the challenges, what are the bright spots, and what are the opportunities. So with that, I will thank Sara and our panelists and wish everybody a good afternoon. Thank you.